All right, so first off, thank you guys for coming out. My name is Jason Helton. I'm the director of an upcoming film called Let There Be Light, Photon and the Birth, Life, and Legacy of Laser Tag. With me today is Vincent. I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name.
Desiderio Scioli.
Bless you. I'm going to try this. Desiderio Scioli.
Yep.
All right.
That's it.
Awesome, thank you. He is one of our consulting producers. What you'll see in the final film does have a lot of archival footage, which you started shooting footage in Photons.
In the 80s. I got my first camera when I graduated from high school, 87.
Okay, so
it's an 8mm video camera, and I brought it to tournaments and whenever we visited Photons, and we just shot stuff. It's not a good light, but we got a lot.
But it looks good. It surprisingly looks good. It's a lot of fun to also see it from back in that day. And then on my left is Mr. Ben Anthony, who is our animation director. One of the problems with replicating 35, 37-year-old laser tag system is A, you can't play it anymore. B, most of the equipment doesn't work, so it's really hard to even demonstrate it. So our solution for that was to break out old school animation, and he's going to be showing off some of the animation work that he's done. One of the things that's really cool is that he's gone ahead and reimagined Photon for the 21st century in the way of arena design and things like that. So we're going to show off a little bit of that towards the end. We got a lot of big plans with that. But before we go into talking about the movie and all that kind of stuff, we're going to kind of go over Photon laser tag and how it was created. So this talk, as we call it, is the birth, life, and legacy of laser tag, and a marketing plan that would make the Spaceballs proud, because oh dear God, did they market this thing. So we're going to talk about the 1980s for a second here. I'm a child of the 80s, if you hadn't guessed that already, as many of us might be. And as a nerd from the 80s, didn't have a lot of stuff to quench that nerd thirst. We had Battlestar Galactica and Tron and Buck Rogers and sparkly vampires. And, 1970s and 80s television didn't really do a lot. And so, VCRs were still in their infancy. So I was literally trying to rent copies of Star Wars and things like that as much as I could. And so, we had certain outlets that we had. When I found my father's Atari 2600, that changed my life forever. We had arcades, which my parents never took me to because they were, dens of debauchery. Yeah, I was going to say I was going to go to hell because I played in arcades. And then I found BBSs, bulletin board systems. But other than that, the precursor to the internet. But really, we didn't have a lot to do. Then, I guess it was 1986, I saw this. Oh, let me get audio here. I guess we don't have audio from this, but yeah.
Laser tag, the game that moves at the speed of light, from Worlds of Wonder Stadium not included. Laser tag, available now from leading department and toy stores.
So, needless to say, that commercial changed my life, because when I saw that, I wanted to know what the hell that was and where the hell could I get it. And so that year, I got a set of laser tag for Christmas. Got 2 guns, 2 little chest thingies, and I have a sister who was 3 years younger than me and hated all things science fiction, so I had no one to play it. My mother, who really didn't spend a lot of time playing things with me, would hide the target around the house and make me look for it to get me out of her hair for like a half hour. I would shoot it, and then she'd have to go out, and she actually went so far as to buy, they had an accessory called a Starbase that played the game against you. So you had a target that would shoot at you. That's how far she went to not have to actually play this with me. So little did I know, that I guess it was 4th grade, I got invited to Tommy Moscato's birthday party. Tommy, if you're out there, thank you. You've spawned a career. At a place called Photon. At this point, I had never heard of anything, besides, all I knew was that it was a place that had laser tag. So I thought I was going to that weird dystopian future with the, people screaming at me and the weird goggles and stuff. So the only picture I have has this weird banner in front of it, but basically I was taken to the seedy place in Dundalk, North Point Shopping Center, which had, there's a movie theater there that showed like second run movies. It was like the cheap movie theater.
It was a flea market, right?
And there was a flea market next to it. And like, I mean, we're talking like swap meet flea market, not like, nowadays they sell like knockoff Prada bags and things like that. So in fact, this is what it looks like today. That is the Photon. And so I go in there and the experience was life-changing in that, you walked in the building and everything was sci-fi oriented, from the neon lights, the signage. They had, weird new age music playing in the background. We got in line to play the game. And, to digress just a little bit, we go in there to play the game and you get suited up, and I'll show you some of the video of that kind of stuff in a moment. But we got suited up and taken out, and it's a bunch of like 10-year-olds all huddled into this room, like the engine room, wherever we started off at. And this is at least the way that I remember it, but you hear this ethereal voice basically welcoming you to the game, and it starts counting down. And the way I remember it is as the lights kind of got dimmer and dimmer until it was almost pitch black, and then it said begin. And I looked around and, we had like the one adult in the group. He goes tear-ass running out there. I look at, Tommy, he's nowhere to be found. This other kid is huddling in the corner. I think he's crapping his pants because he's terrified. And I just go running. And for the first moment in my life, I actually, having looked up to Buck Rogers and Luke Skywalker, it's like I was them for just that next 6.5 minutes. It was amazing until I realized that the battery belt weighed about, 10 pounds, give or take?
Yeah, the whole thing was like 13
The whole set of equipment was 13 pounds. So I had a battery belt that weighed probably about 10 around my size, 10-year-old waist, that I forgot to wear a belt. So I spent half the time basically keeping my drawers up. As people were watching above, they had an observation deck. So basically I'm doing my best to, one hand on my battery belt / pants, hoping that I'm not going to moon the crowd and trying to play this game. And it was the most amazing 6.5 minutes of my life. And there's really no quite way to describe it except that it's completely immersive. So I'm going to kind of go into the bit of the birth of laser tag and how it was created and a little bit about what it looked like, because my words don't do it justice. So we're going to go into the birth of laser tag. So right here is a promotional picture when it first came out with Mr. George Carter there in the front, the gentleman who invented it. So Photon was inspired by this. Essentially, George Carter went to see Star Wars in 1977 in a movie theater in Las Vegas. At the time, he was running a go-kart track in Las Vegas, and what he said was, in watching this, is that this was basically an ancient game. It was tag. It was cops and robbers. It was, as he described to me in my interview with him, in growing up in the Arizona desert, they had dirt clod fights where you would basically throw big things of dirt at each other. But essentially, the idea was that all these games were a lot of fun, except for the fact that they always ended in an argument. I got you, no, you got me. And so it would end up usually in fisticuffs. And so the concept that he had was, how can I modernize this game, this very ancient game, and make it into something that, is modern and we can keep score? So he did just that. And he created, basically, he holds the patent for laser tag. But what's interesting is that as much as it's called laser tag, it really isn't laser tag. And that's mainly because infrared tag is not remotely as cool sounding as laser tag is. So all laser tag gear, in fact, the stuff that you would use if you went to any of the sites today, is all infrared based. You have, sensors that pick up infrared transmissions. So, you fire a beam, and usually you'll see a laser nowadays, but that's just for show. The infrared is shooting at a target, and it works identical to your garage remote, your television remote. The technology hasn't changed since the 70s. What made it interesting with Photon is that George decided to reverse it. Instead of actually tagging the packs, you're capturing them. So the targets on the pack, the helmet, the chest, and all that kind of stuff, instead of receiving information, actually transmitted the information. So in fact, Vinny has some really great footage that you'll see in the film eventually, where I guess you shot it with an infrared filter.
It was probably on, what is it, infrared?
Yeah,
That's all it is.
where you can actually see the packs broadcasting their information out in the form of light, basically. So what happened is that you would aim at the player, you'd pull the trigger, and if you were on target, you would capture their signal. So what was cool about this too is essentially the system enabled real-time wireless communication about 20 years before commercial Wi-Fi came out. Basically, in that helmet, I think George said is like 25 feet of wire that's been coiled up to act as a radio transmitter. So we all probably have tumors in our heads from,
I hope not.
But basically 150 baud wireless modems were built into the systems to transmit to a central computer. So the way it worked is if I shot you, my pack would report to the computer that I just captured him, and then send a signal to his pack saying, okay, you just got hit, shut down for a few seconds. And it would update the scoreboard. What's cool about this is that this is ages before real-time scoring existed in places like other laser tag facilities. The 90s, early 2000s didn't even have real-time scoring. It was something you had to pay extra for. So he had basically built this system in place 20, 30 years before it became standardized. But he did this very specifically because the idea was to get people who couldn't be playing the game, who are watching or waiting, to be able to engage in it, to watch a scoreboard. One of the things that he had also was an observation deck where you could see the entire field and actually observe. He had phaser stations where you could kind of play a target game from up there to interact with the game without necessarily playing. So the idea was maybe you weren't ready to go out down and play, or maybe you weren't tall enough to play or old enough. You could at least go up and watch and kind of interact. But this also came with problems because that wireless communication, again, the way it worked with the FCC back then is you couldn't generate interference, but you had to accept all interference. So George jokingly talks about how when they opened up their first facility in Dallas, that odds are every garage in the neighborhood kept opening and shutting as they were playing because they, were transmitting all these IR signals. So eventually they had to decide to insulate the arenas. So they basically built a Faraday cage out of chicken wire that surrounded like the entire field to basically lock the signals in. It was pretty impressive back then. So the equipment, in fact, you know what, Cam, my son is going to come up here and model the equipment for me. Come on, dude. Come on, dude. All right, Ben. Yeah, that's right. You do get to, oh, yeah.
Everyone chant, do it, do
all right,
it.
now, you know what, Ben, actually, can you model it for me? You've never worn it, so.
I have not.
So the equipment consisted of, was 13 pounds of equipment, which consisted of a helmet, which was quite bulky, a chest pod, which contained all the equipment, the phaser, and I don't have a battery belt with me, but the battery belt was essentially a photographer's camera battery belt that wrapped around your entire body and weighed a massive amount of equipment. So what was cool about this equipment too is so all around the helmet, you'll see like little dots. Those were actually indicators to show off. Some of them were LED lights to show off if you had been hit or your team's color. But right next to them were the IR transmitters that were actually going out there and broadcasting the equipment, the signal. The cool thing about that is in the back of the phaser was a red light. So when you actually had somebody on target, that light would light up to let you know that you were on target because of that reverse IR technology. So when you saw that light and you pulled the trigger, you actually had a really good chance of hitting something. So
If you're colorblind too, the green would blink faster than the red. And then when you got hit, it'd go yellow and it would just be solid.
So they did a lot of really interesting things to like make it accessible to everybody.
Really good sound system inside of peeping to give you information about what it was.
Very true. All the information, because you had no display screens or no vibrations or anything like that. Like normal laser tag, you get hit, you'll hear a noise, your lights would go off, your pack will vibrate. You had to basically go off of all audio cues, and basically you had a pair of speakers that were mounted inside of the helmet and all that kind of stuff. What you'll notice too, Ben, if you can hold up that phaser, you'll notice the barrel of that phaser is actually pretty long in comparison to other laser tag systems. That also was due to that reverse IR, because it's capturing signals. And so with a short barrel, it would capture multiple signals at the same time. And so you could theoretically hit everybody in the entire room if I was placed in the right place. The long barrel actually narrowed the field that it would pick up, so it made it more pinpoint. But what was cool about it is you could actually hit somebody from the entire length of the arena if you were good enough. And that brings me to the arena. So a modern laser tag is about 5,000 square feet, give or take. The arena at a Photon was generally speaking around 16,000 feet. And, to explain how massive these were all 2 floors. They, 16,000 feet. I mean, you would run an average, a half a mile during the game easily, if you went back and forth and actually were active, which, by the way, back then you could run in laser tag. It was cool. Nowadays, none of y'all have experienced that, nor have you experienced the pain involved when you collide with somebody. But to give you an idea of, before I show you some pictures, and Ben, you can sit, you can ditch that. You're good. Thank you. To give you an idea, thank you. Yeah, give it up for Ben. Thank you. To give you an idea of how much effort went into these, they had an architect build symmetrical arenas so that each team had the exact same playing field on each side. So it was always basically a fair environment. They had Hollywood quality lights and music system going on. Like lights would fade in and out. They had all kinds of crazy stuff going on. The music was composed, and I don't think I corrected the spelling here, but by Ken Calais, who was the engineer for Fleetwood Mac. Apparently George knew the guys from Fleetwood Mac. They actually invested in Photon, and they hooked them up with Ken, who did the music for them, with renowned synthesizer programmer Gary Chang, who's done a lot of video game music and old 80s synth music, actually did the performance. So, imagine you walk into this place, especially at 10 years old, with these theatrical lights and this ethereal music and speakers in your head that are broadcasting noise. It was amazing. So the arena itself is this is kind of what it looks like. So some of these, the shot on the right was taken by a recreation of the arena. They actually had built one in New Orleans that took the original field and modernized it with modern lights. But you had, it was a very high tech. It looked like it came out of the set of Buck Rogers or not quite Star Wars, but very Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica-like, sets. And, as a kid not being able to play often, they were huge, and to be able to explore was kind of limited because you're always getting shot at. So you never really got a chance to enjoy the arena for what it was. But the thing about it is, they took a really lot of interesting ways of going through and running this as a business. For example, they had a level of exclusivity. You had to have a membership to play. You had to buy a passport, which was your ID card. And there was a couple reasons why you had to do this. One, they had to make sure you were tall enough. You had to be 4'6" to be able to play. But you had to buy your passport, so it was added income. It was your liability waiver. Your parents had to basically sign away your life no matter what happened to you. But in talking to George, one of the things that he said was that there was a level of exclusivity. You had to be, it was almost like a private club in that you had to be a member to play. And it kind of added a little bit of that, fear of missing out is what I guess you would call it today, because you wanted to play. But also being smart, all the photons were connected. in some way, shape, or form because they were franchises. He established a nationwide marketing database. He knew everybody who played at every center, and it had their address, phone number, all that kind of stuff. So he made this massive marketing database in 1984, 85, which, again, ahead of its time because this was all computerized. So Photon was specifically not designed for children. The equipment did, weigh about 13 pounds and you did have to be 4'6". Photon was also not cheap. Tommy Moscato's birthday party cost about $40 a kid, which you figure that was 1988 money. So that was a lot of money. Tommy's dad was a lawyer or something, so that's how they could afford it. But the average cost of a game of Photon was about $5 for 6.5 minutes of play. Putting that in perspective, the average cost of a laser tag game is around $7 to $10 now for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So you factor this was probably about the equivalent of today's money, about $15 a game, give or take, plus the membership fee that was involved. Plus your passport expired, at least in Baltimore, it expired at the end of the year. So if you went to Tommy's party and you only got to go again at next year's party, which was my case when I was little, you had to fork over that money for that new passport. But what was interesting is the game was designed, as epic as it was and as sci-fi as it was, to be more of a sport than it was to be a game for children. They had one of the first things that they published was a competitive rule book that actually went over, how to play the game in a league perspective. They actually had referees who were trained in how to ref a tournament and things like that. The other thing about Photons is they were expensive to open. That's why they were so expensive to play. Carter decided to franchise this out. He sold the franchises for about $150,000. That was just for the right to open one. And again, this was in 1984, 85 money. And the average investment that it required to open a Photon successfully was about $1 million. So we're talking, again, today's money, we're probably talking $3 to $5 million to open up one of these facilities. He sold 80 franchises. Only 40 of them were actually able to get the funds to open. And so Photon was very exclusive. One of the things that he mentioned was New York. He sold a franchise for every one of the boroughs. And none of them opened, and because one of the things with the franchises is it would lock out other competitors. So basically each borough in New York was allowed to have one Photon center. Somebody bought all the licenses. That was it. And they never opened. The other thing about it is, the marketing. So one of the things that George really knew is, and if you talk to him, he'll tell you that he's an inventor. He's not an engineer. He's a guy who can get people together, and he established an amazing marketing team. It started off with, your regular stuff. You had the t-shirts. One of the things you had to wear with the equipment was they said it was for sanitation. In reality, it was because they didn't want anybody getting lice. The hairnets. You actually had to wear a hairnet.
Party hat.
Yeah, the party hat. Yeah, that's right. We keep party hats. So you could buy a Photon branded bandana for only $5 or whatever. So, you had things like the obligatory satin Photon jacket. You had the t-shirt. And then as things went on, you had the lunchbox. Now, the lunchbox was not based on the TV show. We'll talk about the TV show in a second because, oh my God, you've not seen anything yet if you don't know about the TV show. But he went so far, again, marketing towards adults. You had things like the lighter, the ashtray, the beer koozie. I mean, he put the Photon name on anything he possibly could.
Do you have a picture of the sneakers?
No, they're sneakers?
Yeah. I don't have a picture of it. I have a tag.
Holy crap, they're sneakers, guys. All right, so, but what was cool about it is as he did brand this, he was smart about it in a 1980s way. So the official uniform, which didn't last very long, looked like a villain on, that screams Battlestar Galactica villain. the promotional items. I mean,
Those are two posters.
yeah, like seriously, that looks like what's her name from Galaxina. I mean, who was that? Like Dorothy, that one Playboy. I don't know. I digress. But like, they did all these really strange and bizarre and innovative marketing schemes, and then they got the deal with for this.
You have been chosen to be the ultimate laser warrior. First, choose wisely. Choose the only laser that really works. It scores on the helmet, scores between phasers, and module. When going into battle, don't get tagged. Be the ultimate laser warrior. Only Photon.
He looks way too happy to be playing laser tag in his bedroom in the middle of the night. It's a little with the creepy guy looking in his window. So essentially, George sold the marketing rights to a company called LJN. LJN, makers of things like water guns that got people shot. We'll mute this because we don't need to hear that. But home paintball guns, because that's fun, and the ever-present popular Friday the 13th video game. And by the way, just to remind you, they did also produce Dune action figures, which is an abomination and also awesome. I have to point out, I just found this slide last night. Did you notice that Fade has the cat that like Thufir was supposed to milk? Anyway, I digress, that just bothers me. And the fact that it says on here they sold a stuffed sandworm, a 22-inch stuffed sandworm. If that isn't phallic, nothing is. So anyway, yeah, exactly. There's kids around. The sleeper can't awaken until after 9. Anyway, so they marketed Photon for the home market. You had the home set, which had, the helmets. You had the phasers. They actually gave you a fake battery belt that was just plastic to make you think like you were one of the big kids. And it came with an ID card so you could pretend you were going to Photon with the big kids. Now, interestingly enough, some of the franchises took advantage. The one in Kentucky, in Louisville, Kentucky, in order to have birthday parties, bought a metric shit ton of this equipment in order to let the kids run around their full arena with the little toy version. So anyway, LJN decided to pimp out Photon any way they could. So they reached out to a company called Deke. Anybody familiar with Deke Entertainment? They've created some amazing things like Inspector Gadget. I mean, so then, sorry, I had to. So at the same time, they're competing with laser tag. They came out pretty much at the same time. And apparently they were going to have competing TV shows. So on September 13th, 1986, Laser Tag Academy aired on Saturday morning cartoons. 1 week later, this abomination began.
There was time. There was Photon, the crystal energy force which creates and sustains life in our universe. The warlord of R and his evil army are determined to control Photon and use it for their own.
So I'm not going to make you hear this entire thing, but essentially Deke Entertainment decided, hey, we can do this really cheap by farming it out to Japan and by making it live action. And so they did. And they created a 26 episode abomination called Photon that essentially ripped off the entirety of The Last Starfighter. So essentially, Kid Wonder, Christopher Jarvis, is really good at playing Photon, so much that he gets abducted by aliens to fight in their Photon war. Yeah, it happens, with this motley crew of characters like Parsival, the young kid who was also abducted, Pike the poop emoji, the Fu Manchu robot Lord Bathan, who's actually named after a player in Dallas who actually looked like him.
Parsival too.
Parsival was named after a player. You had Leon, who was essentially he looks like if a lizard starred in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. got the droopy eye and all that. Like the costume was horrible. But what was interesting is it was filmed in Japan, and most of the actors in costume actually worked on kaiju films, like, Godzilla films for the Toei company and all that kind of stuff. And then you had the bad guys like Mandar, the bad guy with the raccoon eyes, Pyrar, the pirate, because in space they have green pirates with a mechanical bird on his shoulder, the four-armed warrior, and then the sock puppet in the corner, the bedazzled sock puppet, the warlord, was the big boss of them all. And so this came out and it was crap, but that didn't stop them from marketing it. So you had things like the coloring book, the stampers, the storybooks. Do you remember the storybooks where you'd play the tape and it would read it to you? And I didn't even realize that existed, but it gets worse. The Japanese Famicom game that never got released in the US that has nothing to do with Photon besides having the logo and a guy with a helmet on it. The costumes for Halloween that were only purchased by parents who hated their children. It essentially was a plastic mask with a plastic bib that had the picture of the character on it. Like, the only person who bought masks worse than this was the dad in Halloween 3. But these were like absolutely awful costumes. They had the color forms, the action figures. The cool thing about the action figures, they actually worked like you could play laser tag with them. They would shoot each other. They had little sensors. Only 2 of them actually got released, but the prototypes are out there, and they were actually pretty damn cool. They all had accessories, like the helmets would come off. They actually did a good job with those. But they didn't stop there. Then you had the book series. So it started off with a gentleman by the name of Michael Hudson, who I think it was a pen name, who actually wrote a teenage novel. And then you had Peter David, comic book writer, going by the pseudonym of David Peters, because even he knew these were crap, had a line of 6 young book series that basically didn't really follow the TV show, but were kind of like a spin-off of the TV show, with such stories as they had the kid who, they recruited somebody who liked to gamble too much. This one, for the glory, one of my favorites, they go back in time to fight Nazis. Like, seriously, the bad guys decide they want to recruit Hitler to join their space army and be like a space. They even call him Hitler because all the bad guys have an R last name. So they're going to recruit Hitler to go and fight for them. So they have to go back. Yes, sir.
Where can I get a copy of this book?
eBay is your friend.
They're out there.
Or I've got one in my bag for only $100. No. So, I mean, these are, of course, he meets his grandfather and saves him on Normandy Beach. And I mean, they actually Peter David actually really tried, but ironically, all the attempts that I've had to interview him, I have begged him to come on camera with me for the film. And he will not return my phone calls or emails or the fruit basket I sent him. A lot of people try to distance themselves as much away from Photon, the TV series, as they could. To the point, so one of the things about it that is kind of amusing is that back in the 80s, remember how cartoons always had to have a message at the end? So you'd have G.I. Joe telling you not to start fires and make pork chop sandwiches or whatever. Photon took a different route. Instead of giving you the little snippet of a message at the end, they decided to bludgeon you over the head with that message for 23 minutes. So usually the episodes would start off with Bodhi on Earth encountering some kind of problem that only his experience in Photon will solve. Like the time he meets the girl he's recruited by his mother to take a girl to the prom, who he says is a dog. This is back in the 80s, so you could say these things and not get shamed. And so he goes and spends a mission with the Photon warriors and discovers that beauty's on the inside. And so, but to make matters worse, he goes to pick her up for the prom, expecting to look for her inner beauty. And in the meantime, knowing that she is unattractive to him, she went and got a perm, contacts, and makeup, and made herself look good for him. Totally sent the wrong message, but this was the 80s. So you had all these messages that would go through the entire episode. The one where he gets hooked on drugs is hysterical, by the way. He turns down somebody for drugs on the way to Photon, and he gets put into a mind mush machine that makes him act like he's stoned. And when he gets back, the guy tries to sell him drugs again, and he tells him, no, I don't want drugs because I do something cooler. It's called Photon. And throws a thumbs up and a freeze frame at the end. It's the epitome of 80s. If you want to do a study on the 80s, just watch the TV series. So getting back to a little bit more seriousness, if you ask George Carter, the TV series was actually the beginning of the end for the Photon, the game. It changed the demographic because now you had kids wanting to come and play. Instead of it being a teenage hangout where teens and young adults could go and network and spend time with each other and do cool stuff, you now had 10 years old kids wanting to be Bodie Lee, and kind of messing up the game for them. Going along with, how expensive it was, things were starting to look bleak. However, Carter was making money. So he made an attempt to defranchise the company and essentially buy back all of the stores that he had sold. So he basically said, all the franchises, you can either buy yourselves and become separate from us, or I'm going to buy you back. And he started, and he was really working hard toward it. He had investors and was getting money, and he filed for an IPO. The IPO started on October 19th, 1987. Anybody know what that day was? Black Monday. His investor money was gone from a stock market crash that no one had predicted, and overnight, all of his plans to keep Photon alive vanished. Gone in a flip of a switch, basically. Now, the thing about it is there's been a lot of people who've tried to keep Photon going. When Baltimore closed, a couple of the players was about to close. A bunch of players bought it and tried to keep it open, and did for a couple of years. When they had to close that, they opened a new location a few years later in Laurel. They had problems there with financing. Apparently, banks want certain amounts of money in certain periods of time, and they weren't quite making that. And so they had to close that again, but they kept the arena intact and were able to move down a couple storefronts and reopen. It was like a year later? Something like
probably 6 months.
6 months later.
New company.
Yep. New name, new company. He couldn't use the Photon name anymore, so he called it XP Laser Sport. And in that location, he was open until 2019. At one point, he did have to change out the equipment, but, do something a little bit more modern that actually had replacement parts. But what was cool about it is that we would have conventions. They would break out the equipment every year or so, and the amount of work that went into it was amazing. But we'd break out that equipment and play, and it was amazing.
People came from around the country to play again. There was a real upsurge from groups, Virginia Beach, everyone, Dallas, Chicago, everyone just at one point around 2017 were just like, man, I miss playing Photon. And we're like, we can do it. We just have to replace all the batteries. But people came.
They did. And it was kind of amusing too, because we got some of the actors from the TV show come out. Mandar, David Stay, who now, his claim to fame now is he's a flat earther and who has a podcast and spews conspiracy theories. He's a trip to watch. I can't agree with anything he says, but it's interesting to watch anyway. There's been other attempts. In 2008, they tried to reopen a Photon in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Jim Struther did a really amazing job rebuilding the original field. Because of problems with landlords, he was open 5 weeks. He invested a massive amount of money getting equipment up and running. 5 weeks, it was over. We were supposed to have our final reunion in 2020. Then COVID came. At that point, XP Laser Sport closed, and they've closed permanently. In fact, what's left of the arena, that was a few months ago when they demolished it. So it's gone at this point. But the cool thing about it was the amount of memories that were made, especially at those conventions. And pardon me, I get a little misty over this because I got to bring my kids there. We got to actually experience it, what was cool about the reunions was 2-3 generations of people were actually together playing. And like you brought your kids,
I
right?
brought my kids. They were little and they loved playing it. And they had played other laser tags, more modern ones.
Yeah, and so it was absolutely amazing to see like 3 generations of people playing this game that shouldn't have left the 80s for all intents and purposes. So that is essentially the short version of the story of Photon. At this point, Vinny, talking to us about what it was like to actually play it in the heyday.
I heard about it because of radio ads. And then, in all markets, you had a local TV show called PM Magazine. They came to our Photon. And then, was it 2020? Who did the big one?
Yeah, 2020, it was 2020 with Barbara Wawa. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where...
Yeah, John Stossel. Yeah,
nationally. So that started bringing a lot of people. And I played. I was 16, loved it. Like you say about the playing with dirt balls or even playing guns with people and going bang, bang. This, you had a score, you had a reaction, you weren't hurting anybody. And I got into it. I played. I joined leagues. I played in my first tournament in Kenilworth, my second one out in Louisville. And then I worked there, became assistant manager. It was a blast. We made friends in that little, what were we open from? 85 to 88 in that little amount of time. And this was pretty much everybody's story in all the different locations. You made friends for life. And these were friends that weren't necessarily your school friends or your religious friends, family. These were people that just loved playing this game and wanted to play it as a sport. And that's at least what those of us who played. There's plenty of people who just love coming in, love the fantasy of it, putting the stuff on, running around, playing with the music, running around stuff in the dark. And that was great too. But we played pretty seriously. We played in tournaments. I forget when the last tournament we played actual Photon was. It may have been like 2000.
2000. It was the reunion tournament in 2000.
Yeah.
I played in that one. It was the first Photon tournament I could actually play because I was an adult and I could actually pay my own way now.
And people were still coming just to play. Now, once your Photon, it was funny because once your Photon closed, you weren't necessarily any good.
Yes.
And everybody experiences this. But they still came to play and try and relive it. And I don't know, it was a blast. I love playing it. And I still like playing a lot of different laser tags, but Photon is always one of the favorites.
It is. And the thing about it is it's not like any other laser tag you've played. And if you haven't had the opportunity to play, not to sound, like a jerk, but I feel bad for you because it's not really laser tag. It's not, it's more sport-like. It is more intense. One of the things you'll notice, and George actually told me that they did this on purpose, is the helmet limits your vision. It gives you tunnel vision. So kind of reminds me of playing like a VR game rather than running around an arena with kids screaming and with a little vest on, because you're kind of laser focused on what's in front of you. So it was like what we're having blinders on essentially. So your head always had to be on a swivel.
You're always looking. And then the thing about getting hit was you can still be hit. A lot of laser tags change that. You go down, that was it. You're down for 5-10 seconds. You couldn't be hit. But in Photon, you had to keep moving because you can still lose points if you're down.
Don't forget the fog machines.
Oh, yes.
Fog, you
Right.
see it in the pictures, but the fog machines really change the dynamics.
And anytime I run into fog juice, it just reminds you of Photon.
I can still smell it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The disembodied voice, computer voice or whatever,
Yep.
kept the pace and kept things moving along. And
Yeah. Oh, you have a question over here?
Yeah, has there been any preservation of the music? Because you mentioned it quite fondly, and do you know what tracks there are? Who made them?
We have them all. We have all, I guess it was 10 tracks. They were all from Ken Calais.
He's the father of Colby Calais.
Yep. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. What's cool is they're actually, when the Photon business closed down, all the rights reverted back to George. And so George has given them to us. So that's actually going to be the soundtrack to the film.
Yeah, Ken has the masters.
Yes.
Every Photon got 2 CDs. Mm-hmm. So like when Albuquerque closed, they sent out a list of stuff. Like they were selling their parts and everything. So I told my manager, I said, just ask for the CD. I paid $7 and I have a Photon original CD from Albuquerque.
What about iTunes?
Well, you know what? The problem is that it gets sketchy because George has the rights to use them in a limited amount. He's not allowed to, at this point, like profit from them. So like, for example, I can't pay him for licensing the music for the film. That's why he gave it to me. And so anything like, could Ken Calais do it? According to George and George's lawyer, no. According to Ken, maybe. So
Yeah, Ken thinks so.
Ken thinks so. Last time I talked to Ken, he thinks he could because he was asking me, he's like, how many stores open? Because he had apparently a contract for only a certain amount of stores could be opened with his music before he got more money. So he was like hitting me for information. I'm like, Ken, there's no money left. Can't imagine. So real quick, before we so we're going to end this with the trailer for the film, but I want to turn this over to Ben, my animator, who is doing some amazing work reimagining Photon for our film. Like I said, we can't film in a Photon anymore, obviously. And so I've asked him to be, what started off to create a little video to explain the technical side of the equipment has turned into him reimagining Photon. And I'm really excited for you to see this. Your keyboard's not working.
Oh my, hold on 1 second.
Rob.
Good question.
Oh, you have a question over there, yeah.
While he's setting up.
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned that there's a light on the back that lights up when pointed at somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys not have any sights?
No.
Not really. They have a little thing on the top that kind of looks like an iron sight, but they didn't work.
The light in the back would also show in the front. So if you saw a lighted phaser looking at you, you could duck, knowing someone was going to hit you.
Okay. I'm ready if you guys are.
Yep, cool. Go for it.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I'm a filmmaker. I started making movies when I was 10. I started animating when I was 13. I started in 3D, and then about a year ago, I got into 2D. Yeah, so that's kind of my background. Weirdly enough, I come from more of art house filmmaking. I love Tarkovsky and Mizoguchi. So I like making films where nothing happens. So it's kind of weird being on the other side where I have to make something that's exciting because that's not my jam.
And let me throw this out there too. Ben has never gotten to play Photon. He's never actually been able to step foot into one.
Yeah.
So this reimagining that he has done is all from his imagination and from the footage that we've sent him.
Yeah. So you guys ready to see something fun? Something fun? Yeah. All right. Let's see if Blender will handle. The computer's taking its time.
The beach ball.
Lovely. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate. Oh, I don't know why. Okay. So this is what I built. This is the 3D layout before rendering. I've only had a few archival photos and a couple of videos to look at, so I kind of had to, just try to, oh, my bad, improvise. Where did I go? Oh my, 1 second, let me get back in the camera view. And I've made it worse. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness gracious. Hold on 1 second. I apologize. As you can tell, I'm slightly unprepared. 1 second. My gosh, this is impossible to. Here, 1 second. I'm gonna switch cameras really quick. View. Camera set active object. That made it worse. How have I made it worse? Oh my goodness gracious. Hold on. I'm gonna do this.
Yes, sir.
You guys are mentioning VR. He's obviously pulling up where he's put this virtually. Have there been any attempts to turn this into a first-person shooter, or turn it into a VR experience?
It's funny you mentioned this because we are actually in talks. There's actually an International Laser Tag Museum in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're talking with them. they're actually interested in investing. We're trying to basically make a virtual laser tag museum with the idea of our recreation of Photon, but also the original field in VR. You know, right now we're looking for a programmer, basically. So if anybody programs, see me afterwards.
Have you talked to Steve Mavronis too?
I have. And
He did the Doom one. And
somebody actually did a recreation in Unreal that is phenomenal. Steve Mavronis. It's actually out. You can download it. And he actually just recently updated it so it'll work on like Unreal 4, I think.
Okay.
But there's been some recreations and we're working towards more.
Okay, so this is the rendered version of it. 1 second, let it load. Textures are still loading. Blender's a little slow right now. There we go. So this is what it looks like when it's rendered out. We got a lot of fog and haze in here. I got a couple of, so part of my workflow for this has been starting in 3D and then doing traditional 2D on top. I come from a background of live action, so I like to have the camera movement feel largely, closer to live action. So a lot of my method has been, part of this allows me to kind of find new camera angles that I might have not had seen before in the storyboard. I built all of this. I had some sci-fi assets I had built fairly recently before doing this, so I was able to kind of kit bash some things and just have fun with it. And then let me show some other environments as well.
Just want to mention to people, that's the observation deck, if I remember right, up on the upper right. That was where people could come and watch and fire at you.
Yeah. In this rendering, it's more of a playfield area, but it's kind of designed like the observation deck because, like the way he has it set up now, there's actually ramps that would go up to it.
Okay, it used to be able to kind of like observation area.
Yeah, you can go. Yeah. It went halfway across the field on top.
Old memory.
Yeah.
Two bases that you sort of make a point, right?
Yeah. And that was one thing that other laser tags rarely had was the ability to watch your kids playing.
Yeah, that was amazing.
So I'm going to load up some other stuff so you can see some of the
great marketing. You go up there and watch someone else play. You say, I want to do this.
It was genius, and they did that on purpose, and that is something that they have not done since.
Some of it's space. People don't want to pay for that extra space.
Absolutely.
But what XP did, and I loved what he did, he wound up putting his party rooms up there too. So you had your birthday party up there on the ob deck where people are playing.
It was cool because he would actually be able to charge a premium for those party rooms. They were like the VIP party rooms. So if you wanted to be able to watch your kids play, you had to pay a little extra for it. And it worked because those party rooms would be the ones that would get booked first. Yeah. I mean, people would fight for those rooms.
Nowadays you can live stream from the parties. That'd be tremendous.
And some of them actually do. Some of the more modern laser tags will do that now where they will have cameras in the field and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, some tournaments will do that too. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is one of the part of the sequence is we have some like other hallways because I really wanted to kind of just expand on the Photon concept. So I built a bunch of other things. I built this. I looked a lot at in addition to Photon, I grew up playing Halo, so I love Halo. So I kind of I drew a lot from that and Star Trek, all that jazz. So this is a corridor I built. Let's see, what else can I show you guys? I don't know. We'll see what I got.
And what's cool about the work that Ben has done for us is, the way I kind of pitched it to him was, take the Photon concept and then kind of like have at it, let imagination kind of flow with the idea of building something like if we had millions and millions of dollars to build the ultimate field. And that's what he's kind of done with some of the lighting elements and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And, part of it is, it's not my creation, so I can't go fully, I can't go totally crazy with it. I have to, be somewhat faithful to what already exists. But, I've been able to kind of experiment and have fun. This is again, just more world building stuff I did. Let's see, is it loading in? This is like a elevator shaft that would take them to the arena. Sorry, it's just very slow today. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's just because I'm in a weird new environment. But yeah, it's hard to see. I guess probably for you guys all the way in the back. This elevator shaft I built. One thing I really love about this particular setup is there's a red light inside the elevator, and it's kind of just bouncing off the walls, and it's actually extremely detailed. Let me show you guys really quick. Let me just go into texture mode. You can see, like, I don't know, I go a little crazy, almost for my own, for my own detriment, just detail. And if you were to hide the exterior of this elevator, you'd see I even like wired things, and just the excessive amount of detail I put into things is just, it's so much.
If they were still building Photon arenas, this would be a great prototype.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we actually are pitching with, like, working with laser tag companies, is the idea of, could we 3D generate you your arena and let you walk into it essentially before you buy it? And so there's a lot of things that that our company is currently working on to try to maximize keeping Photon alive a little bit in little homages, but then B, just kind of modernizing things and using the more cinematic and artistic aspects to be applied to a game that's just basic and fun.
Modern architecture firms are doing this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about cardboard cutouts anymore.
Yeah.
I like the look of yours, but the ones arenas that we had carpet on the walls and carpet everywhere. I'm sure it was for sound deafening as well as safety.
And reflections.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Reflecting, like if you can reflect off the walls. So if your IR's on paint,
So
the problem is
we didn't get the metallic reflective look there. It was much more.
When people didn't want to pay for that, that was one of the first things they cut out of the budget, is carpet on the walls. But I got rug burns all over my arms.
Yes.
With that in the fog,
Yeah.
it was much dimmer, and you could not see it all the way across the arena.
So we're gonna quick. Are you good or?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So we're gonna quick. I do have a little bit. I'm gonna pull. I'll let you shut down in a second. Let me pull this because I know we're getting close on time. I do have a bit of a treat, or I don't know if I'd call it a treat necessarily, but I do have a rough version of the trailer for the film. If you'd like to see where we are going with this, let's see. Bear with me just 1 second. Now I'm going to have technical problems. Oh, shoot. Audio.
Currently, 2 teams compete in a multi-level arena, and they use phasers attached to vests to gain points. It's basically like a nightclub with lasers.
I remember playing that game as a kid. We call it War or Soldier, and the game was always a lot of fun, but it would always end in an argument. One kid would say, "I got you," and another kid would say, "I didn't get you." So I thought, well, that'd really be fun if you could put it in the right context and have a computer keep the score.
Just remember being like, walking into the lobby and just being overwhelmed that I was actually at this place and everyone inside it was playing laser tag.
The game was, just unreal exciting. It was the fastest and longest minutes of your life.
This dark, mysterious, glowing field with lights and fog. I was in heaven.
It was challenging. It was really different kind of technology at the time, and we were using some primitive stuff to try to get the job done, and they had to work hard.
The maze was huge. It was a dark tunnel, corner-filled teenage makeout dreamland.
Photon wasn't built for kids. There's a lot of Photon people who didn't even know there was a kids' TV show.
Go shit.
From the waiting room in, the experience was immersive.
It was a defining moment in my life. I knew when I got to the top of those steps, I said, I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life.
You've never experienced anything like this.
There was nothing like that before.
We go to another planet. Yeah, it's been a hell of a ride, I'll say
It was
that.
way ahead of its time. There wasn't anything else like it. So it was so different. It's memorable. And it was a time of their life with they're remembering things and having fun.
Disperse to exit. Disperse to exit. Disperse to exit. Disperse to exit.
Thank you very much. Again, it's a rough version of it. You know, we're going to have the official version out hopefully in a week or two. You have a question in the back. Yes, sir.
Actually, no. This is more of a small world kind of thing. So in your trailer, near the end,
Yep.
there was a gentleman with a black t-shirt.
Uh-huh.
His name was Randall Metting.
Yes.
He was my instructor when I was in the Delaware Correctional Academy.
Yep. Randall is one of our very good friends. We've known.
He was the head instructor from my class.
Yep.
Wow.
So that was crazy to see him like, oh.
Go back and talk to him about it. He'll talk.
Yep.
He'll talk Photon forever.
Yep. So we are out of time. Obviously, if you want to come up and, we'll be happy to answer questions, and all that kind of stuff. You want to take a closer look at the equipment or just talk Photon for a little bit, we'll be happy to hang out. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming to MAGFest, especially when COVID's going on. Thank you so much.